Egypt, a beautiful North African country, home to some of the most well-documented history and art of an advanced ancient civilization that we have yet to discover and probably ever will. For many people in the West, when you think of ancient Egypt, you think of pyramids, deserts, the Sahara, the Nile, Cleopatra, King Tut, and maybe even ancient alien conspiracy theories? Hi, I'm Mia. I'm an art and visual culture major with a concentration of art history at App State University, which is basically the longest way to say that I'm an art history major. And being such a huge nerd, I'm well aware of the fact that I'm way more obsessed and knowledgeable about ancient Egypt than the average person is. And I say that knowing that before college, the most I ever knew about ancient Egypt was the process of mummification in excruciating detail, because they felt the need to teach us that. Don't know why. So when I hear people question, misinterpret, or even theorize about the construction of the pyramids, I can't really blame them for their ignorance. You're not really taught about the history and logistics and cultural impact of the construction of the pyramids of Giza. That was such a long sentence. You don't need to know about that. And speaking of theories, I think that one of the most well-known ones across the world is the idea that aliens helped construct the pyramids. The theory's popularity is so immense that I wouldn't bound it to art history, I wouldn't bound it to ancient culture. It is a global phenomenon. I think almost everyone knows about the theory, or maybe even subscribes to the theory or has heard of it before. In addition of being a lover of art history, I also happen to be a lover of aliens and conspiracy theories. So I decided that I would take a closer look and research some of these theories. Now whenever I hear someone bring up aliens and pyramids, even in passing, I get a bad taste in my mouth. And the simple explanation to why is that these theories are real problematic. And when I say problematic, I'm not just saying stupid or incorrect. I mean like white supremacist Nazism problematic. I'm a big believer in the fact that antiquated civilizations continue and will always continue to impact our daily lives, culture, and relations in the 21st century. So with that being said, is it possible that these fringe conspiracy theories could affect and perpetuate modern day hate speech and prejudices? And if so, how? I'm going to answer that. Before I explain the history and birth of ancient Egyptian conspiracy theories, it's first important that we define the term pseudo-archaeology. In his essay, I'm Just Asking Questions, an analysis of white supremacist pseudo-archaeology, anthropology student at the University of Victoria, Ryland Vandersloot, defines pseudo-archaeology as, quote, the rejection of academic archaeological explanations of the past for the purpose of inserting one's own speculative analysis. So now, let's go back in time to track the origins of these conspiracy theories. In the late 19th century, author H.G. Wells had just published a sci-fi novel titled The War of Worlds. The story revolved around a Martian invasion and the subsequent fights that occurred between human and alien militaries. Spoiler alert for the 127-year-old book, the humans win. The
War of Worlds
is significant, as it's commonly considered one of, if not the first piece of media to speculate on the existence of intelligent life beyond Earth. It also brought up the idea that maybe these aliens interacted with people in ancient times and helped influence their culture, their archaeology, so on and so forth. A year after its release, in 1897, astronomer and writer Garrett P. Serviss would publish Edison's Conquest of Mars, an unofficial sequel to an unofficial adaptation of H.G. Wells' original novel. In her article, Pseudo-Archaeology and the Racism Behind Ancient Aliens, Professor Sarah E. Bond explains that in the novel, quote, Serviss posited that giants of Mars had moved large blocks and built the Great Pyramid. He even noted that the Sphinx had Martian features, which, might I add, feels a little wrong to say considering the fact that the Sphinx's facial features were based off of a real pharaoh. But that's neither here nor there. Over nearly half a century later, Swiss author Erich von Däniken, remember this guy's name, he's important, von Däniken would publish his novel, Chariots of the Gods, Unsolved Mysteries of the Past. Unlike H.G. Wells' original book, Däniken's novel is credited with popularizing the theory of ancient aliens interacting with ancient cultures, not just as a fictional plot point, but as a real scientific idea. Like this could be real, guys. However, it may be important to note that he wasn't the first to speculate like this. No, that achievement would go to Losif Esk Shukvlv, a Soviet doctor whose name I cannot pronounce.
Isif Shklivsky and Carl Sagan.
So take that as you will. But he was the one who popularized it with his book. Important distinctions here. In 1973, NBC would air an adaptation of the novel titled In Search of Ancient Astronauts. Another side note, the entire cast of this adaptation was white, save for one Navajo actor who on IMDb is credited as playing Ancient Man. Besides making the book a bestseller in the United States, the TV adaptation is significant because, in the words of Professor Bond, it, quote, translated and visualized pseudo-theories of archaeology and science for broad popular consumption. So much so that the adaptation was commonly shown in schools throughout the 70s, which is an interesting choice. Now that we've established the origins of these conspiracy theories, why don't we talk about the content of the theories themselves? In this section, we're going to be focusing on three main aspects of ancient Egyptian culture that happens to commonly be targeted by these conspiracy theorists. Those three being architecture, art, and language. Luckily for these conspiracists, ancient Egyptians loved keeping records of things, so they have a lot to work with. For example, language. For language, I'm going to be focusing on this specific image. This image depicts a set of hieroglyphs present in the Temple of Seti I in Abydos, Egypt. Love that guy. Anyways, it's not that surprising to see why this could stir up some speculation among believers of aliens and, hell, even time travelers. I mean, there's a helicopter, okay, a yacht, and this article says that there's an airplane in there, but I'm not sure, and allegedly a submarine. Whatever you want to believe. This one's pretty easy to debunk, and I guess it became common knowledge that this is not in fact a submarine on this hieroglyph, because I really haven't seen anyone talk about this image in years. Author Fred Cherrygarden explains in his Atlas Obscura article that these hieroglyphs, quote, have to do with the legacies of different rulers. In ancient Egypt, it was common for hieroglyphs to be recarved over time, especially when a new pharaoh came into power. The first carving, made during the reign of Seti I, was covered up with plaster and redone during the reign of Ramses II, another pharaoh who I love. Just want to say. So it's really as simple as that. The plaster just eroded and it kind of looks weird. Also, this image is photoshopped half the time, so that's a common theme you'll be seeing throughout this video. It's as simple as that. So we've knocked down language, let's go to artwork. For artwork, there's one piece that conspiracy theories love to point at as evidence of alien interaction. That image being another one you might have seen, the iconic Dendera light. This image, dubbed the Dendera light, is a relief found in the Hathor temple, which seems to depict a figure holding up a spotlight of some sort. Many also believe that he's holding an oversized Crookes tube, which I learned is the proper name for those old-timey long light bulbs. To add to the mystique that surrounds this piece, gaining access to see it in person is very difficult and only allowed with the companionship of a certified Egyptian guide. This relief is used by evidence by many theorists, including the man himself, Eric von Daniken. Yay! In another Atlas Obscura article, user Tassam presents and summarizes Egyptologist interpretation of the image. Mainstream scholars interpret, quote, a combination of a lotus flower, a djed pillar, a symbol of stability, and a snake rising from the flower through the womb of Nut. Surrounding inscriptions further solidify this interpretation, as they, quote, reference the rising sun, which will spring out of a lotus flower in the shape of the snake god Sematui. Nut, by the way, is the goddess of the sky, and in this relief, her womb is represented by that weird light bulb shape. Yet again, our answer is written in plain sight, and it's much more simple than these fringe conspiracists think it is. Yeah. Now onto the most controversial and well-known piece of ancient Egyptian culture in general, its
architecture.
More specifically, the Pyramids of Giza. These three pyramids were built over a 100-year period and are known as the only remaining wonder of the ancient world. These pyramids served as temples and tombs dedicated to pharaohs Menkaure, Khafre, and Khufu, who happened to be son, grandfather, and dad. So cute. Textbook The History of Art, A Global View, Prehistory to 1500, describes these tombs as, quote, the most visible remains of funerary complexes built and endowed by rulers to enact their rebirth to assure the order of Egypt and the cosmos. Besides being massive structures, with the largest being made up of approximately 2,300,000 blocks of stone, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons, they also, quote, reached a height of 481 feet and cover more than 13 acres. These pyramids were built with mathematics in mind. Our Ancestries article, Unraveling the Mathematical Genius of Ancient Egyptian Pyramids, lays out some measurements. These include the angle of Khufu's pyramid being roughly 51 degrees, a number calculated to ensure stability using, quote, principles similar to the Pythagorean theorem. The pyramids are even aligned with the cardinal points, as in never eat soggy waffles. This alignment would have, quote, required a deep understanding of astronomy. So sure, it's understandably difficult to fathom how this level of architectural perfection was achieved solely on manpower. Egyptologists have theorized that a ramp system, about a decade worth of work for each pyramid, and cities of enslaved laborers in combination is what really built these structures. Sure, it's taken hundreds of years of research to come to this conclusion, but why believe that when I can believe in silly little aliens? And honestly, what's the harm in perpetuating these theories anyways? It's not like they're based in white supremacist and Nazi ideologies. At Reed University, Professor Thomas Landvatter, along with technologist Beth Platt, led a class back in 2019 titled Pseudo-Archaeology, Why Should I Care? To the instructor's surprise, the class ended up being very popular, so much so that it had to be moved to a different classroom. Pierce Gherkin of Reed Magazine wrote an article about the class titled The Pyramid Conspiracy, in which he includes a very insightful conversation between Professor Landvatter and a student. Gherkin writes, quote, "A student asked why these theories weren't applied to civilizations such as ancient Greece and Rome. Why aren't they?" Landvatter replied. The professor then went on to elaborate, quote, "You see, pseudo-archaeology principally applied to places that are exoticized, like Peru, Native American civilizations, and of course, Egypt. So could these theories' exclusive focus on non-white civilizations be a coincidence?" Back to Professor Sarah E. Bond's article, Pseudo-Archaeology and the Racism Behind Ancient Aliens. Bonds takes a closer look into the beliefs of the authors who first popularized these theories, notably Eric von Daniken, author of Chariots of the Gods. Well, in 1979, von Daniken would go on to release another book titled Signs of the Gods. And in this novel, he really made his beliefs clear. In his blog about bad archaeology, British archaeology officer Keith Fitzpatrick Matthews goes on to highlight and sort some of these really telling quotes. These include, but are not limited to, oh god, I don't really want to say these out loud. Quote, "Was the black race a failure? And did the extraterrestrials change the genetic code by gene surgery and then program a white or yellow race?" Interesting question. Another quote, "Nearly all," insert slur here, "are musical. They have rhythm in their blood." Quote, "The evolutionists say that man descends from monkeys, yet who has ever seen a white monkey?" I will not be reading the rest of that quote, but I'm sure with context clues you can discern the comparison he goes on to make. Quote, "Today it's assumed that primitive men had dark skin." Not even true, by the ways, and I saved the best for last. And I quote, "I am not a racialist, yet my thirst for knowledge enables me to ignore the taboo on asking radical questions simply because it is unlikely and dangerous. Why are we like we are? Once this basic question is accepted, we cannot and should not avoid the explosive sequel. Is there a chosen race?" I'm sure I don't have to explain very in depth why Mr. born in Switzerland and raised during the Holocaust he's alive, is a very problematic figure. Is it a really bad look on the fringe conspiracist community that the man who popularized their beliefs is an extreme racist? Sure, just because von Daniken was racist doesn't really make the theories racist, right? Objection. In Julian Benoit's article, Racism is Behind Outlandish Theories About Africa's Ancient Architecture, Benoit writes, quote, "The same people have no problem believing that medieval Europeans built the continent's magnificent cathedrals using only ropes, sticks, and wood. They dismiss scientific research that overwhelmingly proves ancient Africa's prowess, but insist the documents which contain evidence of Europeans' construction processes are beyond reproach," end quote. Yet again, it is quite honestly just as simple as that. Whether they're aware of it or not, and I'm sure most of them aren't, people who entertain this theory, believe it, or share it are sharing a theory that's based off of racism and white supremacist values. The people who popularized this theory, such as von Daniken, truly believed that there was a superior race, and it sure wasn't the black race, and that they couldn't be capable of building such architecturally, mathematically, aesthetically perfect buildings. So they had to resort to the next most logical explanation, which in this case was aliens. When you think about it, it is a little sad that some people would rather believe that Martians built the pyramids instead of just like trusting in the intelligence of a black civilization, but I don't know. Unfortunately, conspiracy theories that are based off of white supremacy don't just stop at aliens and pyramids. In general, theories that are about a superior race of advanced civilizations having to appear and help less advanced civilizations are very in line with the Nazi Party, and they would use this to their advantage. Prime example being the lost city of Atlantis. In James Siedel's article, The Legend of Atlantis has a dark, terrible history. He writes, quote, "Adolf Hitler's henchman Heinrich Himmler had a dream. He believed the Third Reich was a modern incarnation of an ancient super race. It was justification for the Nazi Party's authoritarian rule, its ambitions towards Europe, and its persecution of Jews. What he needed was something to prove this Aryan superiority. And the myth of Atlantis gave him such an opportunity. The Nazi Party's adoption of theories about the lost city of Atlantis fit perfectly with the story they were trying to sell. The Aryan race was superior, but if this was the case, how could such primitive civilizations of Mesoamerica and Africa and India build up such stable civilizations? Their answer to that question: a lost super civilization of superhuman beings who happen to be Aryans and Atlanteans that, quote, could have uplifted such simpletons across the world with their sophisticated ideas. Because, people of color aren't capable of sophisticated ideas or anything like that. I digress. So, I now believe that I've thoroughly explained and proven that these theories are based in the idea that an African civilization could not come up with such complex and sophisticated ideas. This leaves me with one more question. How do these conspiracies continue to perpetuate and contribute to modern-day prejudices? In Stephanie Halmhofer's article, Did Aliens Build the Pyramids? And Other Racist Theories, she cites a survey conducted in California by Chapman University. The Survey of American Fears found in 2018 that, quote, 57% of the respondents believe that ancient advanced civilizations, such as Atlantis, existed, and 41% believe that aliens visited the Earth from an ancient past. She concludes her citation with a sentence that I find very telling. Quote, "These have become more than just beliefs. The realities for those who have embraced them." Besides the obvious point that these theories are seen as evidence and fuel for racists who believe that the white race is really the supreme race, they also contribute to the physical, literal, and direct damage done to African heritage. Why did two German hobbyists deface a cartouche of Khufu inside the Great Pyramid, and what does it have to do with Atlantis? Is an article published by Jamie Seidel and discusses exactly what it sounds like. The fact that back in 2014, two German men pretending to be archaeologists snuck into the Great Pyramid and literally vandalized ancient history, destroying it forever. Dominique Goerlitz and Stefan Erdmann describe themselves as, quote, amateur archaeologists and hobbyists. Well, these two hobbyists managed to get their way into the pyramid and find a red pigment scribble that inscribed who the pyramid was built for, Khufu. And this makes me extremely upset, proceeded to chisel off pieces of this red pigment to prove their conspiracy. And what was that conspiracy?
Hey, I have no idea why this part of the video cut out, but let me tell you their theory. The academic world is colluding to conceal the true age and nature of the Great Pyramids. They're not monumental structures built to contain the tombs of Egyptian pharaohs, they're really 20,000-year-old Atlantean power stations. It's even dumber than you'd think.
Back in 2014, these two idiots were tried and sentenced to 5 years in prison by an Egyptian court. Their charges? Theft and smuggling of antiquities. Pretty much wraps it up. Always gotta tie back to Hitler somehow. It's like that one, In conclusion, fringe conspiracy theories about pseudo-archaeology in relation to ancient Egypt do have harmful consequences, even in the modern day. These theories perpetuate ideas of white supremacy. They encourage the defacement of thousand-year-old artifacts and buildings. And just as, if not even more disturbing, they have a direct connection to the Nazi Party, who had a large part in perpetuating and spreading these beliefs. So what's the main takeaway here then? Personally, my biggest takeaway from doing all this research is that you really need to thoroughly investigate which theories you support and spread. Just because at face value something doesn't seem harmful, it just seems silly, it could have very deep and serious roots and consequences. I know it's easy to doubt that these gigantic marvels of architecture were built just using manpower in an ancient civilization, but at the end of the day, it does much more harm than it does good to question these civilizations and their intelligence. Because in doing so, whether knowingly or not, you are questioning the prowess of the black race. So no, aliens didn't build the pyramids, Atlanteans did not give ancient Egyptians light bulbs, and I still don't understand how that's supposed to be an airplane.